on all the big issues of our time, on austerity, on investing in the future, and on a socialist foreign policy. And when he becomes Prime Minister, he will lead the most transformative government this country has ever had. Please give him
welcome. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the World Transformed. A little bit more about that in a moment. I've just come from the vigil we held with the Yemeni community here in Liverpool, and I think we should send our support to them. They're going through a deeply stressful time because they're getting news from back home of what the Saudi-led coalition is doing to their country and bombing and killing so many people. And the message I gave was quite simply this: we're with them, and whilst I obviously want us to send all the aid necessary to deal with the consequences of the war and the bombing, the best thing to do is stop the war altogether, and to start that and to begin that by ending our supply of arms to the Saudi coalition. Is the pen holder at the United Nations on a Security Council resolution. They should have done something about it a long time ago. We're continuing to raise the issue in Parliament, and I wanted to make it clear to the community here, which is why I went to the vigil just now. Can I also say thank you to the World Transformed for the events organised at conference, because to me it's the very lifeblood of our movement, of our party, of the Labour movement history, that there is space for debate, for understanding, for education, to try out ideas and have that kind of discussion. The World Transformed brings a lot of people together in order to explore those ideas and explore them from the principle of the kind of society and kind of world that we want to live in. And I think the World Transformed, to me, is in the best and greatest traditions, but it's also utterly 21st century. We come together at a conference. It's open, people are all welcome, and we use social media a great deal to get people to come, but also to share those ideas. So I'd just like you to thank everyone that put in so much effort to organise the World Transformed. It gets better. I heard some of the discussion that you just had before I came in. I was just behind the door there listening to it, and very good discussion it is too. The work that's been done by Naomi in North America, that's done by all of us here, and that sense of unity that we have. Because what we're doing is challenging a neoliberal ideology that took over the world in probably, let's say, 1970s or thereabout, when the whole idea of tax cuts, reduce the size of the state, increase privatisation and trickle-down economics, later inherited by Margaret Thatcher. The brutality of the way in which that kind of Reagan economics was experimented on the people of Chile in 1976 onwards was utterly brutal to them. Reagan and Thatcher carried it out in real time in the 1980s with mass privatisation, deindustrialisation and we're still paying the price for that in communities all over this country and all over the formerly strong industrial areas of the United States. It's not a way forward to destroy all industry that you've got. It's a way forward to make sure you have an industrial base, an investment-led economy, but above all, an economy that utilises technology to protect the environment, technology to create jobs, but also technology to share the wealth out within our society rather than hoarding it in the hands of the few. Challenging neoliberal economics is fundamental to what we believe in. And when I was first nominated for the leadership of the Labour Party in 2015, it was an interesting experience that was put upon me straight away. Very interesting. And the fundamentals of why we put my name forward to be leader of the party was nothing to do with me, it was to do with the principles behind what we're about, which is that austerity has been meted out on the poorest and most vulnerable people in our society. They are the ones who paid the price of the banking crisis of 2008. All the time, the very richest in our society have had tax breaks, giveaways and tax havens. I tell you what, they're on borrowed time because the Labour government is coming to tax. Why there was such a resonance in the party and in the movement and in the general election last year, when all the expert commentators on the planet wrote us off and saying, you're putting forward absurdly extreme ideas. I don't see anything particularly extreme in saying that I think rough sleeping is immoral and everyone should get a roof over their head. In saying a living wage should be for all workers at £10 an hour. You should have rights to work from the time you start your work. I don't think there's anything particularly extreme in saying that all schools should be properly funded so that head teachers don't have to decide which member of staff to get rid of. What we put forward was actually basic common sense social justice. Socialism is about providing for all, but it's also about caring for all. And so I don't want to live in a society where 1 million people use food banks. I don't want to live in a society where people are rough sleeping. I don't want to live in a society where a quarter of us get mental health problems and get very little support in dealing with them. Surely the kind of socialism we want is one that protects you in the sense of the provision of public services, but also gives you rights at work and democracy at the workplace. So the creative endeavour and genius that's in all of us is actually utilised, not just in school, but beyond that, in our rights at work and everything else. I was fascinated by many of the workshops put down here in the World Transform, where you're discussing industrial democracy and the creative industries in this country. And I think that's a fantastic way forward. We live in a planet that is on its own. We're one planet. I know there are many people who send me emails every night saying they've discovered a new planet somewhere else. I'm slightly sceptical about some of these things in a sense of it. And so I think we should look at what we're doing to this planet and look at the environmental requirements on all of us. We cannot go on with these levels of CO2 emissions, these levels of pollutants being put into the atmosphere, and assume that somehow or other nothing is going to happen, and the sea will somehow or other magically eat up all the rubbish that we put into it, and the air will somehow or other purify itself. Then you look around the world and you look at the death rates from air pollution in big cities all around the world. It's bad here, it's worse in many African big cities, it's dreadful in many South Asian big cities. And these issues should not be counterposed saying, well, those of you that want to protect the environment are somehow or other anti-economic growth, which is the argument that Trump and his supporters use. I use the absolute opposite argument. Intelligent use of high technology, intelligent use of the information technology we've got can actually, and it does, create clean vehicles, clean transport, does create good quality, efficient, environmentally sustainable agriculture, and it doesn't have to be polluting in the way that it is. So Donald Trump saying he wants to walk away from the Paris Climate Change Accord and tear up all those decades of environmental campaigning that got us over that hurdle towards that place are totally wrong. And our movement has to be as strong on environmental protection and eco-protection as it is on social justice, because that is the way we protect the future for all of us. And so we will be developing energy policies. We will be developing energy policies which create far more renewable and sustainable energy. But it does mean there has to be the education process that goes with it. And I do think we need to look quite a lot at how we approach education and how we think about it. And that's why we put forward in the manifesto last year the principle of a national education service, education from cradle to grave. I think education should be a benefit to the individual and a benefit to the community. Hence our proposal, which, yes, it's expensive, but I think it's the right way to invest our money, was to end college and university fees in order to make further and higher education free for everyone that wants to undertake it. But ensuring that we give a good chance to everybody in order to undertake the education that they want to, because I get increasingly concerned at the over-competitive way in which schools are set in league tables against each other, and so much of our education service turns out to be in competition. That pressure then ends up on not all, hopefully only a few, but some schools looking askance at an underachieving 13 or 14-year-old, realise they're not going to do terribly well at GCSEs, never mind A-levels further down the line, so gently easing them out and moving them on. And those youngsters growing up in difficulties, can't cope, end up being excluded from school, and you know what? Too many of those end up in the criminal justice system, end up in prison, and end up with mental health difficulties. We have to look at education in a different way and see the creativity and value that is there in all of them. And I'm very determined that we should achieve that. And so there is so much that we're doing, which is about policy development and is about understanding what we can achieve as a movement. But it means we've got to do the conversations and debates ourselves, which is what we're doing, of course, but it's also about taking those campaigns out there to mobilise people, because winning an election is not going to be easy, we all know that, and it is about mobilising people to win that election. Mobilise through strength. If you stop the government closing a hospital, if you've got more houses built, if you've got your street cleaner, your river cleaner, whatever it happens to be, people feel emboldened by success in campaigns. Imagine how much stronger everybody felt after the election last year. Very disappointed in not winning, but strengthened by our campaign and the sense of confidence that it gave us all. And so we reach out to all communities, but we also reach out around the world. I started by mentioning the situation in Yemen, and I conclude with this thought. There are now more refugees around the globe than there have ever been at any time in recorded history, including the periods after the First and Second World War. And those people are all victims of wars, human rights abuse, environmental degradation, utter poverty, and economic disasters. And they are trying to survive, living twilight existences or in refugee camps around the world. And many of those people are extremely angry. And we have to have a strategy and a policy which is about global economics as well, which is a package, if you like, of linking up with others to oppose neoliberal economics and austerity, but also to say the strategy of wars and intervention has created the refugee flows that many are now suffering from Afghanistan, Iraq and Libya. And so let's approach this refugee crisis with the humanitarian values of support for those people and do everything we can to work with others to give them a place of decency and safety. There are others across Europe and across the world who have a very different agenda. The rise of the far right in Central Europe, the rise of the far right, hopefully to a lesser extent, but nevertheless is present in this country, is an ominous and dangerous sign. Those that would seek to divide us against minorities will create an atmosphere of hate. That atmosphere of hate intensifies as they get nastier and nastier towards whichever minority they're choosing to blame. At the end of that process, you've created hate, you've created distrust, you've created oppression, and you've created a horrible atmosphere of violence. You haven't built a school, you haven't built a hospital, you haven't trained a teacher, you haven't educated a child. We have to stand as one community with all our pride in our diversity in order to be united to bring about the social changes, the social justice that our movement, our party was created to achieve. The World Transform brings together people with experience, people with knowledge, people with ideas, people with imagination, people with hope. And it's people with imagination, hope, ideas, and that creative ability to organise with others that does transform our society, does transform our world, and does show that at the end of the day, popular movements coming together, united for social justice, are so much more powerful than anything that tries to divide us with a super competitive neoliberal economics. I know which side I'm on, I know which side you're on, I know which side we're all on. Together we can win this. Thank you.
What Jeremy was just talking about there was one of the great injustices of our time. In Turkey, at the moment, there are people who are fighting with courage and determination against a dictatorship which is armed to the teeth.